jungle. Take me back to the jungle. Hey. Take me back to the jungle. The city keeps me distracted, but I know where I should be. Tell my mama I'm leaving. Just take your mask off and join me. I know you're dying to see all the secrets I'm hiding. One day soon I will find. I know I am close. I know I will shine. One day soon I will fly. I know I am free. I'm feeling alive. Take me back to the jungle. Take me back to the jungle. Hey. Take me back to the jungle. I want to get rid of the stress that builds within me. Oh, I want to take off my clothes and hang from a tree. Oh, one day soon I will find. I know I am close. I know I will shine. One day soon I will fly. I know I am free. I'm feeling alive. Take me back to the jungle. Take me back to the jungle. Take me back to the jungle. together now, you'll see just how this life is supposed to be. Come on.
Testing, testing. Okay. Hello and welcome. I would like to say hello again to our on-site attendees and also welcome you all online because we are starting our Tesena Fest online now. And I would like to first start some organization topics. We will be using Slido for all the questions to have all the questions on-site and online on one place. So if you have any questions, there are two options how to ask. If you are on site and only one option online, use the Slido. For the on-site attendees, wait for the break and discuss it outside. But during the stream, we will be using only this Slido application. I would like to introduce our three brilliant speakers and their topics. And I expect that they do proper introduction because I always somehow screw it up. So I would like just welcome Joel, Martin, and Gitte. Thank you. Thank you also for you from online. And then I would like to welcome Joel on the stage.
There we go. So, hi and welcome everyone to my chat. Obviously, everyone here on site and everyone here online. Where what I want to talk about today is about a process, basically a process, something that I have been developing with some of our customers and teammates called test orchestration, and hopefully it will be clearer in a couple of minutes. But first of all, a little bit about me. Why are you listening to me or at least not falling asleep in front of me? So I'm Joel. Originally from Costa Rica, currently living in Israel. 3 kids, 1 wife, used to have a dog, now a lot of fish. And I'm what it's called an accidental tester. I'm guessing that some of you are as well. When I was in college, about 1998, someone came and told me if I knew someone who could be a tester for their company. And I was like, I was working as a bartender at the time. And I was like, what's a tester? And they said, well, it's someone who actually plays with the system, looks for bugs, and reports them. Next question, trivial question, what's a bug? And that guy explained to me that it's what happens when the software doesn't behave the way that it should behave. And my last question was if the job is sitting down or standing up, because it was being a bartender. He said, you have not only a chair, but also a computer. And I said, I'm in. Who cares? I mean, I was working as a bartender, so it would obviously be more than that. But I became a tester, and for the first 3 years, I didn't know if I wanted to become a tester. Then I started going to conferences like this one, and I realized that I didn't know what testing was about. And by listening to sessions such as this, I actually understood more about testing, and I decided to stay as a tester. I've been a tester, test manager, QA lead, consultant, everything that can be under the sun in testing. And today, I'm one of the co-founders of a company called PractiTest. We have a test management platform, but above everything else, I'm a tester, and so my work is pretty cool. I get to talk with all of our strategic customers, and I come to conferences, and I learn about how people are working, what challenges they have, and based on that, we deliver a better platform for them. So this talk is also about that. I also have a number of community projects. We have the State of Testing survey together with Tea Time with Testers, and an online testing conference that we started doing 7 years ago, before online was cool. And I'm also a member of the Association of Software Testing board in the US, but enough about that. A little bit about PractiTest, again, test management platform. If you don't have a good test management platform or you will want to get something better, take a look into it, free trial. That's the end of my sales speech. But test orchestration, it's the story of today, of manual testing with automation, of how can we make stuff make sense and fit together with that. And the basic problem comes from trying to analyze what's the difference or how do manual test and automatic test actually fit together. To give you an example, when I try to explain to someone the difference between manual and automatic testing, especially if that person is not a software tester, doesn't have experience, they tend to see manual testing as, let's say, a good manual tester. It's a good thoroughbred, a good horse that can run very, very fast, but they tend to compare it to automatic testing, saying, oh, but that's a sports car. Does the same, just does it faster. And if you have some experience, you know that that's completely untrue. Trying to oversimplify stuff, because usually that's what we do. When I try to explain how does software manual testing and automatic testing actually fit together, I say that it looks more like this, where manual testers are the commando units, the guys who actually go into the field and do the very precision work. We do it quickly, we do it right, but we have very limited coverage versus all the different infrastructures of test automation that will allow us to basically win the war together. So you do not win wars only by tanks. You do not win wars only by commando units. You need to have both of them. And that is how I see the interaction between manual and automatic testing. You need both of them, but we need to know what to use when. Okay, you don't use a ship in order to conquest, to free some hostages in one place. So we need to ask ourselves, there are a couple of additional things, additional challenges that are important to take into account. And one of them is one that I call, especially today in Agile, the testing puzzle. And that is the different pieces that don't necessarily fit together. Obviously, most of us, I used to say all of us, but some people have proved me wrong, will have manual testing in their teams. What do you do with manual testing? Basically test the user stories. Is it good enough? Find those bugs in there. On top of that, you will have automation. Now, there's not a perfect match to automation. There's not even overlap all the time in automation, but you will have it in there. And for most people, they have that mistaken feeling that that is all there is. But there's more than that. Why? Because obviously we have unit tests that are being run, and those are test cases. Why don't we count them as test cases when we talk about coverage? We will have integration tests. We will also have user acceptance tests, even if you have them in your teams. And all of those testing aspects are seldom covered when we talk about test management or test reporting in that. Now, if you're working on today's world, SaaS applications, hosted systems, it doesn't even end in there, because we will have deployment tests. How many people here report or test or have understanding of their deployment tests in their teams? Only some of them. We will have, obviously, monitoring, all the famous testing in production. What's happening there? Do we know about exceptions? Are we able to classify or qualify our releases after they're going out? We'll have customer feedback. We were talking about earlier that if you're a tester on a startup company, part of the feedback is customer support screaming at you about the bugs that you released. And if you're working on today's team, you will even go as far as having an NPS, Net Promoter Score, which basically tells if your product is good or bad in the eyes of the end users. My question here is, given the fact that we're way past being test managers, we're quality managers, quality engineers, how many of us are looking into the whole puzzle when we talk about the quality of our products? And sadly enough, the answer is that not enough. Now, this is not the only issue. Another issue is something that is called test clustering. How many of you know about test clustering? Most of you do, just don't realize it. Let's assume for a second that this is our manual functional testing coverage. This is our whole application. These are the places where most of our tests are being covered in the system. Now let's add into this our functional automation. As it usually happens, some of it will be scattered in other areas. Most of that will be on the same areas because these are the important areas, the risky areas. Now let's add to that unit tests maybe. Might be more, but again, usually they're going to be clustered. Let's go and add some integration tests between the systems. And let's finally ask those nightly builds that go over the end-to-end scenarios. And if you were to do a graphical representation of your testing, it will end up looking like this, where you have a lot of overlapping in some areas, some coverage in some areas, and also some bold spots where no one is testing in there. And you will start testing only if and when there will be bugs in there. And this is nature. This is what's happening today. Why? Because we test in the places where we think there are risks. We test in places where historically we have seen bugs. We don't test everywhere. Simply, it's not economic enough. Problem is that we're overlapping a lot of tests in some of the trivial areas. Tests that we could be not running or not developing if we only knew that they're being over-covered by us. So if we have these challenges of clustering, of different types of testing that we're not taking into account, then let's actually talk about why is this an issue. The issue here is about the differences between manual and automatic testing. Now, do you think that manual and automatic tests are different other than the fact that one of them is run by a machine and another one used by humans? The answer is that they're completely different. They're quite different in everything. Let's give a couple of examples. First of all, as tests themselves, we're talking about very, very different entities. Automated tests are usually deeper, very, very specific. We will go over one function, work with multiple input-output scenarios, try to go into that. Manual tests are a lot higher, less deep, a lot shallower, but very, very extensive. Why? Because we as humans tend to go south and north and try to check everything that we can under the sun. Even within manual and automatic testing, we don't have one type of manual test and one type of automatic testing. If we're looking into manual tests, we can have exploratory versus scripted, regression, sanity, all different type of tests that we call them as a group manual tests. But that's not necessarily the same type of animals here. The same goes with automation. We can have UI, API, functional, load, and some organizations call all of them automation tests, while they're not necessarily the same thing. So we're talking about very, very different pieces of the puzzle. Not only that, but we're talking here about one of the biggest problems, differences of scale. If we want to look into the amount of tests, usually if we look at even on the unit test numbers, we will have thousands of unit test cases for every 10 or 20 different manual tests that we have in there. And again, these statistics that we're talking about. So if we have one unit test that is failing versus one manual test that is failing, which one is more important? How much weight do we give them? Now, the answer, unfortunately, is that it depends. It depends on which test, it depends on what step, it depends on a lot of different things. The same goes for execution. If we're talking here about all the spectrum of automation, it will be running multiple times a day. You will have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of results. I have customers who are generating millions of runs per day. Now, when you talk about manual tests, even if you have a large team, you'll be talking about tens of tests a day, maybe hundreds of tests a day, orders of magnitude different. Again, statistically speaking, on a report level, how do we calibrate between those results? It's not as trivial as it sounds. If we go into timelines of testing, an automatic test needs to run in a matter of minutes. A manual test can run even days. So again, how do we calibrate between that? And maybe the most challenging aspect, and again, this might be both for manual and automatic testing, but mostly you see it for automation, is that if you have different teams, especially different agile teams, no one really knows what the other team is actually developing or working with. Every team within itself will know what assets they have, what scripts, what tests they have. But when we talk about sharing, especially around automation, what we've seen is that it's harder for teams to basically communicate and have shared scenarios on that. Again, if you have an infrastructure that is running great, you will have it run it. But if I want to cherry pick which test case I want to run from the other team, it becomes harder because we're not really aware of what we have in there. By the way, the amount of test duplication between teams, both manual and automatic, it's incredible. And these are all wasted resources between the different teams. Now, above all, and if we need to synthesize it, then at least in my mind, and again, you might disagree with me, there's a difference between the objectives that we have between the testing. Where when we talk about manual testing, we're talking more about the evaluation and discovery, whereas where we're looking into automation, we're looking more about stability and certification. Certification, not to go on the Q&A that we're having, not ISTQB, but certification in the sense that, oh, if it works on this browser and this device, let's make sure that it works in all the other browsers and devices. Both of them incredibly important, but both of them incredibly different from one another, okay? So, how can we work with both of them together? Basically, we need a different approach. The one where we say, oh, let's bundle everything together doesn't really work. If you go today to most QA managers, if there's still that function in your team, if they want to present the status of the system, they will look into their manual results, they will look into the different automation reports, and they will come to their managers and say, we're more or less around this, because it's very hard to put together a single visibility status into what's going on in here. We need to have an approach that, first of all, will think about what do we want to provide our stakeholders? What type of a report? What type of information? Where does it hurt? What's important to know? And once we have that thing very, very clear, then we need to think about how do we put that together? How do we build that approach? And how do we prioritize all the parts that we're having in here? Okay, the only way of having a good mix, a good approach to manage your automation manual test results is by thinking about it and by making sure that you have a plan into how do you want to come into that. Now, the approach has to be completely different. It has to be an approach that doesn't look into each one of our elements independently. We need to look at it from the holistic perspective and from an approach where we're not looking at all the tools, we're looking at the whole process as one. And that is why we decided to call this process test orchestration. Because it's not to look into any one of the tools, it's to look into the whole output. And when you look into an orchestra, and again, I'm a type of a guitar player. I started playing about 5 years ago. But when you're going into a good concert, you don't necessarily recognize all the different tools, you hear the whole orchestra together. And that's what we're trying to do in here. Now, this approach is different because we're thinking about it different. It's not about, let's check what we have in store, let's try to put together something in here. So, what's the approach? The approach was something that we started doing internally. We realized that we want to help other people working with our tool to work together, but I've seen people working with it outside the realms of practice, and if you notice, it doesn't necessarily require a specific tool to actually work with it. But it doesn't necessarily ask you to think about it differently. The process is divided into three main phases. The first phase is called planning or master planning. What do we do in the first place? We start by defining the scope of our testing operations. Now, how many of you, before you start testing, think about what your organization actually requires from your testing? How many of you know if you need to focus right now on the devices that you're releasing? How many of you know if what you need to do is to talk about the regression or to release your products faster? To give you an example, in our organization, about a year ago, we realized that our main issue was that it was taking us too much time to release each feature. Features were okay, almost no bugs reported from them, but it was taking us a lot of time. So our main objective became, how can we release faster? And once we had that objective, we actually focused into how can we provide feedback to developers faster, how can we make sure that the user stories are correct faster. Meaning it was less to focus on the end of the process, more to focus at the beginning of the process. And that is something that I think each of us should do. Now, I know what you're thinking, yes, but we're working on agile process. We don't have the start of the process. We're working all the time on the same process. I'm not asking you to stop everything for 2 weeks, go to an offsite, and then think about what you need to do. No, take 20 minutes with your team, with your stakeholders, try to understand what are the challenges that as a team you need actually to resolve. Once you do that, I want you to go and look into what's being asked from you and try to understand which tools do you need to work with. Which ones are manual, which ones are automated. For some of them, it might be that you don't have stability on your test, so you want to create test scripts. It might be that it's taking too long to test manually, so you want to do more exploratory testing. It might be that your browsers are not being tested correctly, so you want to go into automation. Think about what tools need to be done and what tools do you need to do for each one of the processes, and then break it down to smaller tasks. Why smaller tasks? Because we're working as part of a development project, so we don't have time to stop everything and do everything from scratch. We need to break it down into smaller tasks and then prioritize these tasks and add them into your timelines. Now, as you all know, we're testers, we're no magicians, so we're not going to be able to do it during the nights and weekends. We need to make sure that all of these tasks that we're talking about are going to be counted as part of our user stories. Which user stories? Going to be your infrastructure user stories, your testing user stories, obviously not your product user stories, but they need to be counted, because if not, you're not going to be having time to develop them. But the first process, and that is a process that you can do once every couple of months, is going to be about planning, understanding, prioritizing what you want to do. Once you have that, it will be easier because you can actually start working on that. The second part of the process, it's the process that will help you to ensure that once you have those ideas set in place, everything will be able to work together. And we call that ongoing coordination. Now, for ongoing coordination, it starts by, first of all, having better communication between your teams. If you have one team, you may want to skip this. If you have 3, 5, 7, 12 teams, you may want to start working on that, especially around agile teams. How can you make sure that everyone knows what the other is working about? What test cases are we having? What challenges do we have? If we have integrations between them, have a communication and coordination approach within it. Now, the simplest one that I know and the one that I love to use, Center of Excellence. You don't need to have a test manager managing all your teams, but you can have a group of people that meet together every second week. They talk about their challenges, their main projects, their main communication approaches, and then you can start talking within your teams. Center of Excellence, look it up. We can talk about it later on. It's not magic again, but it does the trick very, very quickly. The second thing that you need to do in this part, and again, when we looked at this process, and again, we've been running with it for about 3-4 years, we try to analyze processes that worked and the ones that didn't work. This was the single most important aspect of the whole approach. It's about having a single reporting and visibility system. It's not about everyone working with the same tool for execution. Some of them might work with Excel, some of them might work with test management systems. You can have multiple automation approaches. What you need to have is everyone funneling down to the same reporting system. Why? Because this is the place where everything's going to be normalized, and this is the place where everything has to come together in order to communicate your results to upper management. If everything is going to be funneling down to the same place, then you're ensuring, first of all, that everyone is going to be communicating on the same factors. and that every asset that is being added to your testing approach is going to end up coming over to your stakeholders. Now, this is actually more challenging than it sounds, because for most people, either they're already reporting to systems or they don't want to report to systems. Again, you might be working with stuff running on Jenkins and stuff running on Practice or Quality Center and some stuff that you're, I don't know, getting reports in HTML. You will need to think about how can you have everything on the same visibility approach. Now, this is important from the human nature perspective. I remember some teams that used to come, again, when people were implementing that and say, hey, we're doing a lot of testing, but you're not counting them. You're not adding them into your visibility system. And then the answer is simple. This is the syntax, the system, report into it, and it will be added in there. Okay? So it makes everything a lot simpler once you have actually management perspective on that. The last part of this, obviously, it's about integrating all the different tools and frameworks. But once you have the visibility approach, it becomes more of a mechanical aspect of the system. And again, it's not something that is done quickly or simply, but at least you will have your guidance into that. Again, the rules that we usually see is that people say, we don't care what tool you're using to run your automation, as long as it reports into the whole process, everything's good and fine. Okay? Now, the last part of the process might sound trivial, but if you remember when I started talking about the system, I talked about myself. I said that I run a report together with Tea Time with Testers called the State of Testing Survey. That's a report we have been running for 8 years. One of the things that we understood from that report even some 3-4 years ago was that as testers, we might be pretty good at running our testing. We're very, very bad at selling our testing results, about communicating them. Okay, most people think that we're doing good jobs, but they are not able to quantify what is our added value into the team. And most times it is because we test a lot, but we're not able to communicate correctly. So here is where we're going to be talking about communication. First of all, make sure that all of your results are going to be delivered on a platform. It shouldn't be about someone calling you and say, hey, what's the status of the product? It should be about making sure that your results are looking more professional. Okay, have a dashboard, provide it to everyone else, and make sure that people are going to be able to see the value of your system at the same time. Now, it's also about working with your stakeholders. It's important to go to your stakeholders and ask them, what do you need from us? How can testing help you? Going back to, we want to know if we're going to be able to release faster, and if not, where are the issues, or we need to make sure that we know what's happening in production, or we want to ensure that if there are issues with our browsers or devices, we will know that earlier. Talk to your stakeholders, your CEO, your sales representative, your customer support. What information do they need from you? Once you know it, you will be able to answer it. And the last part of the puzzle here, it's about using that information and not being shy about communicating it. Not even communicate, but using the same information, communicating over multiple channels. I was reading a report that says that because we're so busy lately, it takes us 3 times to being exposed to the same information before we absorb it as humans. So it means that you might need to put it on an email, then put it on a dashboard, and then during the presentation talk about it, and only about the 2nd or 3rd time will people know what you're talking about and start asking the important questions. So don't be shy over using your information as long as people understand that you're using that. Now, all of this sounds good, but there are also some caveats, some things that we need to take into account. The fact that we have a centralized process doesn't mean that we became cops that don't let other smaller teams improvise and bring more innovation to the system. Innovation doesn't come from the centralized body. It comes from the teams bringing ideas and innovation into the system and making sure that then you pass it along the different stakeholders. So if we're talking about the center of excellence, it's not it's a coordination system. It's not a cop saying everyone should work the way that we're doing it. Also, and the second part of it is about automation. One of the big challenges of automation, it's not called the biggest challenge, is that we tend to add a lot of scripts, but we don't spend a lot of time refactoring and making sure that we reduce the number of scripts. Sometimes it's not good to have thousands of scripts if you only need hundreds of them. So work a little bit on refactoring. And the last thing is that making sure that the stuff that you're talking about here about mostly that integration and reporting factor, it becomes part of the priorities of your team. We see a lot of people who say, yeah, if we get to it, we're going to implement it. But just as no one would dream about working on a development team without having a CI system, Jenkins or Circle or whatever, you need to make sure that people understand that you shouldn't think about running a testing operation without having a good integrated reporting framework for that. Okay, so make it part of your priorities. Now, before we go into questions, and there are 2 minutes before we go into that. So, a couple of things that we've seen throughout the years. First of all, it sounds very sweet to think that we want to centralize everything. We want to control everything. Sometimes we want to work with a limited set of tools. Sometimes we want to work only with one vendor, stuff like that. It doesn't cut it anymore. From our analysis, we know that the average company has anywhere between 4 and 8 different automation tools, because you have unit testing platforms and functional testing platforms and API testing platforms. And if you're counting about different teams, different technologies will use different tools. So live with that. It's not a bad word. You just need to coordinate what you're having in there. Second thing is that in order to have a process that works all the time, you need to ensure that you will have transparency and visibility throughout the whole process. Don't have secrets, don't compartment information between teams. Everything that reports should report all the way up. Don't make it, again, don't hijack information in order to get more power. At the end of the day, it's not gonna cut it. And the last thing, but maybe the most important one, align your testing to the objectives of your business. And in this case, as testers, we should be enabling speed, we should be enabling quality. We're not here to be watchdogs. We're not here to say, oh, you cannot release it because I haven't tested. You should be here in order to say, hey, what is our current challenge? And how can testing and quality actually help you to achieve it faster, better, in the best possible way? So that is what I had in mind for today. And I want to thank you. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, questions. When you're integrating data from multiple sources, how should we handle unaligned metadata or variable data quality? That's a great question. I'm not gonna talk about variable data quality because if you have variable data quality, then you need to make sure that you work on your process to make sure that the quality of your data is not something that you will doubt, meaning variable data quality for me, it's flaky tests. So if you have issue with the flakiness of your test, then that's a whole different story, but try to work into that. The interesting part in here is unaligned metadata. There has to be normalization of data. Let me explain maybe what that question means to me. Let's say that different teams are gonna be calling different areas of your product differently. So some of them will call it login, some of them will call it sign up, some of them will call it, I don't know, new user interface. You need to have a dictionary of stuff. You need to have a dictionary about the components of your product. You need to have a dictionary about the priority of your test cases. You need to have a dictionary that will make sure that you normalize data, not only in the numbers of data, but also in the language that we're talking about. If you go to the Bible, do you remember about the Tower of Babel? The whole problem was that people were not speaking the same language. So here you generate a dictionary, and as part of that communication platform that we talked about, it goes into, hey, if you're gonna be reporting, this is the way that we structured our application. Why? Because when I report a failed on component A, everyone should know what component is component A. And someone will call it component, another person will call it product. So have a dictionary that will help people speak the same language. Okay, and that's part of the communication platform. Okay. That's it, no more questions? Okay. We're waiting 20 seconds. Can someone ask and maybe I will sell it up front? Oh, now we have. How do you handle if the stakeholder requirements change? That's a great question. Remember when we used to work on waterfall projects, 12-month projects? One of the biggest issues that we had was that our product requirements would change in the middle, okay? And so we would come and say, no, you know what? No. We're on feature freeze or we're on requirements freeze. The only way for you to bring me a new requirement is gonna be if you wait the next 12 months and do it. And after a while, we realized that that didn't work because requirements would change constantly. That's the way of the market. The requirements of your product, of your stakeholders will change as well. So we need to adapt to that change. What does it mean to adapt to that change? Expect it. It might be that in this quarter, the requirement is about how can we release faster. And so we release faster, and obviously if you move the carpet to this side, then you started having more bugs in production. Okay, so you will know that the requirements on the next quarter will be how can we lower the bugs in production without being too slow. So you will increase the number of test cases that you're running. And so the next quarter requirements might be how can we test less in order to test more efficiently, so you add a little bit more of automation. So expect to have those changes, and every time try to focus on the challenge that you have in front of you. Now, you might say it will take a lot of time to make a perfect system. Yes, it will, but at least you will start converging into a better process. So it's about embracing that change. It's a little bit frustrating because, oh, we worked quite a lot in here. It doesn't mean that what you did right now, it's not important. But okay, this is trivial, so now we move into the next challenge. So expect that change. By the way, if there's no change in the objective of your stakeholders, that actually usually means that they're not seeing enough value in what you're doing. So that means that you're doing something wrong. Okay, oh, more questions, woo. Do you structure your testing team to manual and automated roles, or should all should automate? Test automation is software development. An automatic script is a script. If I have someone whose skill set is not how to write good software, then they will write bad scripts. Who should automate? Someone who knows how to write scripts correctly. Now, that doesn't mean that it's rocket science. Good developers and good automation developers don't have additional limbs that we don't have, but it's a different skill set. So, I think that today's team, everyone should be technically knowledgeable. I should be able to read a script. I should be able to tweak a script. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to be on my infrastructure team to write automation for my team. Okay, so the answer, it depends. If you have a very small team with one tester, yeah, that guy will be a Swiss Army knife that knows how to automate and how to run manual test cases. If you have a larger team, you may want to have an infrastructure team that does the infrastructure development for your automation, and maybe test architects and have more complex approaches. But it really depends. Who should automate? Someone who knows how to automate. Now, whether the guy automating or the girl automating cannot run manual tests, maybe they can. Maybe they have both skill sets. But it's more about understanding if the person in front of you can actually do both. And make sure that you don't give a job to someone who doesn't have the skills to do that job. Okay? Other questions? Oh, what would be your advice to quickly increase visibility of reporting? There are two things about how to increase visibility of reporting. First of all, invest time on it. A lot of times, and again, this sounds bad, but the reason people don't look into your reports is because they don't look good. They're not nice. They're not good enough for that. So if you have a UI team in your team, ask them for advice. Bring them cookies, and they will do some work for you on the side. It might be just work a little bit on your graphs. It might be colors. It might be different graph platforms. But first of all, make them likable. People should relate to that because they don't look crappy. Again, Excel might be good, but up to a certain level. Then start answering the questions that people want to listen. And again, a big problem that we see in reports is that they have too much data. And for me to understand where the issues are, I need to start scrolling down and down. So when I'm looking at reports, I usually start with what's important, why is it important, and then the rest of the data. So try to have dynamic reports that will start, first of all, by showing where the issues are. Then go into the depth of the issues, and then go into the static data in here. Make it simple for people to process. But again, it's not only about simple, it's also about how it looks like. And again, we're human, so that's one of the things that are happening. Another thing that you should take into account is that different stakeholders have different needs for different information. If you're talking with your developer manager, they want to know where the bottlenecks are. If you're talking about the sales guy, they want to know what's happening with the features that came from customers. If you're talking with support, they want to know what happened with the bugs that were reporting from customers. So don't be afraid about having different dashboards for different stakeholders, because there's no one-size-fits-all for information in the organization. Only for very, very small organizations, that's going to be the case. Most times it is about giving people the information that they need in order to make the jobs they have to do. Two more minutes. Okay, so I guess that we're done, so thank you very much. Anyone has any additional questions? Talk to me in here, or again, people online, just send me a LinkedIn question again. Guess we're done. We're online or offline?
Yeah, online, but there will be some jingle coming up. We have 15 seconds.
So, hi everyone, pleasure to be here, and hi everyone online. And this is really an unusual setting for a conference. It looks to me like a school, you know. And for that, when I was sitting here, I picked up a joke from a school environment. But I will need the help with a woman name. So, can you tell me your name? Jana. Okay. So basically, the teacher, like me, came to the kids on the elementary school and was asking them, so kids, which part of your body will increase 10 times when you get excited? And it was quite like now. And then she turned to Jana and asked her, so what do you think? And Jana said, oh, that's so dirty, I won't even tell that. And then she'd say, okay. So she asked Phil, so what do you think? And the Phil says, it's a pupil in your eye. And she says, oh, great, Phil. And then she turns to Jana and she says, Jana, you have 3 problems. First one, you have not been learning. Second one is that, the second one I forgot. No, you have a dirty mind. And the third one is that you are up for a big disappointment in your life. And now to the point, so why we are here. So I will definitely not be that smart than the guy before me. But I will tell you something about George. So who of you know George? Okay, quite some. I'm happy. So basically, let me tell you the story of George. I was with George for 8 years before I left this story, and now I'm working in one of our regional banks in Česká Spořitelna as a COO. But I was really with the George from almost the beginning, and let me now tell you the story. So for time of, I was definitely responsible for the scaling, for the setup of the team, for the journey to scale it across the organization. I was CEO of the George Labs and responsible for digital on the level of the whole Erste Group. So Erste Group is a Central European banking group with 16 million customers across 7 markets. And it has more than 200 years old history, but it's not that long as a group. So, and this is important that we grew over a very short period of time, over 10 years, basically shortly after fall of communism, and we become the strongest Central European banking group. But the important to understand for the story that I will be telling later is that basically we quickly bought one bank after another, and we never had time for any consolidation. So the banks have nothing in common. So all of them is completely different as we bought them. Usually they are market leader or the second or the third at max on the given market. And then the years back, basically our CEO of the group had an idea, so let's think and reinvent the banking a little bit. And it was back then somewhere around 2012 already. And over the period of time, we developed George. And we were lucky, not I would say smart, because it was rather accident that we gave banking a name. And everybody now knows George. And it's not just the banking like anybody else has. So what was the idea behind George was that basically with the help of design, you can really like shape what the customer is getting from the solution, and you can quickly help him to understand his financials better and educate him a little. And for that one, we had basically a leader in the team as well. That was an Italian designer, Mauri Poletto, and basically we teamed up to make George happen. And now let me tell you a story. So it all started, or before we go that, so a little bit in the numbers, so you have an idea. So as I tell you, if you can count, the story is more than 10 years long. So the first line of code was written like more than 10 years ago. As I mentioned, we have 6 countries by now, where George is in production for quite some time. And we have 8.6 million customers on George that are using it luckily, frequently, and we are very happy with that. And by now, it has more than 350 engineers that are dedicating their lives to basically develop this platform across the region. So it is rather a big beast by now. And maybe now my story will be in the first part. In the second part, as this is a testing conference, I will touch the testing a little bit and in the detail about the front end. But before I tell you basically how do you get there, how you scale from basically 0 or 20 to 350 plus, and what does it mean for the organization around. So the technology of George was made in a way that it is a little bit independent from the complexity each and every individual bank has, and it has an API layer that is shielding us from the differences. Because as I mentioned, all of the banks have completely different systems. There are no 2 banks that are sharing anything in terms of systems. So you define the way how you handle login and authorization, and then you rely heavily on the APIs that have a standard to which the banks are producing and the George is consuming. And then you have huge pipe that is basically transforming all the transactions real time to a big Elasticsearch clusters where you can really get access to the transactions within milliseconds. So this is roughly the architecture. And we go to the behind the curtain. So it all started in 2012, as I said, and it was started with a completely separated unit. It was called B1 at that point in time. And it started all in a completely detached team out of the organization, where basically the nucleus and idea was born. And that team was really fitting one big kitchen table, So they have been all sitting at the kitchen table. And in result of this one, basically you don't need the processes to work in that team. And basically coder is coding something and everybody else is looking around that one. So you don't need even anything around testing, you test it by that everybody wants to try, ideally on him or on himself. And basically it is very efficient. So this is why working at startup, I very much understand, is like great stuff, because it has really family culture, and it is super efficient. Nothing gets lost, because if you just speak, everybody else can hear, and it gets basically very nice experience, and you even create certain culture. And as this was separated from all the institutions that are rather huge, basically it developed its own culture that it then tried to protect even when it was growing bigger and bigger. So as I mentioned, for the testing, it means that basically it is purely manual, if not random, you know, if you even test something at all. And you reach rather the state where it is running on the desktop of the developer. Basically, you have certain quality assurance, but it's completely isolated from the bank. In this stage, it was about having some prototype that everybody would believe that it is good enough to be replacing the main banking channel of the bank. So then we came to the second phase, and basically this is in between years 2015 and 16, where the challenge was to introduce it here in Austria as a first bank, basically first integrate it to the bank, and then make it feature complete, so not just MVP, that we launched quite early, but really have it a solution that is rather comparable with the existing banking. Not that everything has to be there, because still the number of functionalities that the people use in majority is rather limited. In this stage, basically comparing to some lucky startups that make a huge impact with 20 people like WhatsApp, I mean, for most of us, I mean, you need way more people to really get big impact. So that's why you need to grow, you know, and you very easily start to grow that one developer is hiring a second developer, and then he's becoming basically a leader of the team, you know. So then you have a team of front-end developers and back-end developers and testers. So everybody is for his own proficiency getting just more people. So this is how you start to grow, you know, and then you start to read the book about Agile, so you try to work in somehow a little bit organized Agile way. But like when you want to come to the market in a bank, you are hitting the regulated wall, and the testing has to be really like documented, you know. You need then to start write test cases and have a processes and all of this one, because the auditors would kill you if the software would be developed in the banking environment without the proper processes on the background. So it is really like increasing size of people, but unfortunately, it's growing internal dependencies that are making the collaboration a little bit more complicated in between each other. And even though you have some processes, it is still kind of, I would say that they are rather immature in this stage, or they were rather immature in this stage. And what we have seen is that when we have been forcing these individual leaders that have been before like the high individualities, and now you want them, you have to be the leader of the team, not everybody can handle that. And rather, I would say that from the majority of the founders of the George, maybe just very rare it was that somebody stayed, because many people like this initial attitude, and they don't like the attitude when it is getting bigger, and they are no more having this creative, basically hands-on approach, but you are forcing them to grow the team and hire quickly, so we can like do more. So that's why for us it was big learning that basically when you grow the solution, you will be losing people that have been at certain phase super critical, but they simply cannot grow that fast, or they don't want to go into the different stage of the solutions with you. And they have many different reasons, you know. Somebody wants to see everything by himself, and then it's becoming a bottleneck. Somebody doesn't believe that anybody else is better, so cannot hire people that are like good enough and rely on them. You know, there somebody doesn't want to do test automation, you know. So there are really many different reasons why you have to get rid of certain people at certain stage. So, but we have seen that when we have been growing further, so around like 100 people, it was not anymore possible to live with the setups that you have department next to the department. You really start to like form a product-oriented teams. You know, we had like form teams, and they have been focused on certain area of the product, and you try to make it cross-functional. So the people still have been like in legal organization of the POs, so in the department of the POs, but they started to organize themselves as a vertical team. So you had this mixture between line function or line and function. So it was a period of time where we tried to solve this way, that the people will more collaborate together. And it's not that somebody like the backend developers are isolated somewhere in the back and you are just sending them the requests and something is getting out of that. So in this stage, we have been going very successful in terms of George changing the perception on the market. So it was making our group younger and relevant for the younger customers. But for us, it was as well a big challenge. So now you have something in the production that millions of users use. The stability and reliability and performance is extremely important. But in addition, you have to still develop the stuff as you go on. So that was a big challenge. So how do you combine innovation with already a scale and the stability? So that's why basically we started to automate and first like formalize a little bit more, and then automate. So we have been formalizing the agile and the way we should work. We have been like formalizing the way that each of those developers should work out, and the solutions that we built initially, we needed to split into components that have been isolated. So these individual teams, alpha, beta, gamma, can really work independently and they are not messing up with each other. So and they can deliver. From test perspective, so at this stage we still have been relying heavily on the manual testing. So we had a huge team of the testers. Then we started to experiment with the test automation frameworks, and we even had like Indian like team that was like doing test automation, and Serbian outsourced team that was doing the regression test automation. We tried Selenium, Tosca, and many different frameworks. But where we already got heavy on was the backend test automation, because on the backend it is way more easier, or it turns out to be way easier than on the front end, where the visual elements are changing. So the backend and up to the API, that testing was for us the first base, and basically very quickly, like the backend of George was in this stage heavily automated, and we started to automate the front end. Then basically it came the years 2020 and 2021, and we had all the major markets covered. And for us, then the point that we have started to see is that even though we had 250 people, there was like way too much that we wanted to do than we were able to do. So that's why we have been really trying to focus on a platform. So we created a team that was not delivering something, but was caring that the delivery was way more efficient. So those guys were caring about the environment, about the DevSecOps automation, and all of this one. So everybody else that is delivering the functionality can grow, you know. And in that phase, we changed as well the approach. So basically, each team was led by the PO, and they have just been all the people in mixed up of roles was just formally parked under one line manager that was there to approve vacations, but rather had no real role in their life, because for the chapter leads were like telling you how you should do your job, and the PO was telling like what are the priorities and what we are now delivering. And then we had like integration teams, because then we have been by that time running 6 parallel banks, delivering every second week to the banks, basically a new version of the software. And there it was completely visible that without heavy test automation, but not just test automation, but as well like heavy automation as well across the CI/CD, you cannot run it. You know. In addition, we have been experiencing the COVID. So already before we have been working across 3 locations, but the COVID like forced us to do not just across 3 locations, but everybody from home. And the good is that it was no problem in terms of delivery throughput. The bad is that little bit the culture deteriorated. You know, if everybody was at home, the culture is getting a little bit a hit, and people stop to feel as you grow and grow new people, they never had an experience or never have a time to experience the George culture. So basically, that's why you have to tackle it, and we are tackling it quite now. But even this model has its flaws that like forced us to change again. And the flaw of this model is that if you have, at this point of time, we have been, so we have had 17 squads or teams, you know, of roughly 12 people that have been delivering their own areas. But you realize that then, even if the area is not a priority, the people will fill their backlogs and they will keep themselves busy, you know. So, and then you have people that everybody is busy, you know, but if you have something as a priority, you have only 12 people that are working on that because everybody else is busy with something else, you know. And this is something that you have to, or we started to tackle again. But in this phase, we as well started heavily on the front, on the mobile test automation, because roughly here we had very well automated the backend and front end, but we started to work on the mobile app automation. So, and this is the change that we had done recently. So we have clustered like the squads into bigger cluster. Now we created 5 clusters based on certain logic in order that we hope that we will be able to shift the resources in between them better. And we have some people that are like on the cluster level, like cluster PO, and even some analysts that are able to distribute the work more efficiently. And our hope around this model is that we can, as I mentioned, so if we have something as a priority, we can shift the resources there, because I mean, you realize somewhere on the way that even though then you are delivering like 500 different features across 6 markets in a year, then basically the quantity is diminishing the quality, because the customers is hardly able to recognize 1 or 2 across his life. So you have to really focus on less things and do them a little bit thorougher and better. So for the testing, what does this mean? That basically the test automation is a must. There is no way you can work around it. What it says that you by this time know, or the developers know, that the testing is their job, and you still have as well manual testers or dedicated testers that help them do the test automation, but the testing has to start with the development. So because there is no way around this one. And for us now, the job is really so how to shuffle the resources when we think something is really core, and how to now set up back a little bit of the culture that the COVID was stealing from us. So this was in terms of the organization. I'm sure this is not the last change, as you see that we are changing it like every now and then. And besides that, like we are not changing just this team, but as well the way that this team is interacting with the rest of the group and the banks. So there is, I would say that the change is a constant thing. Now coming to the testing a little bit. And here I digged into front end as a particular piece of the solution. So just that you have an idea like what and how we do. So a little bit in the numbers. So we are having 450 end-to-end scenario, where the scenario is running across the chain of 10 to 20 test cases. This end-to-end means they are integrated up to the backends of the individual banks. Then we have 746 that are mocked, because our problem still is that we are heavily, as George is interacting with the bank through the APIs, we are heavily dependent on their local test systems, on the local quality of the test data, and that's why we have a huge amount of test cases based on the mocks, where we can basically have the data rather reliable than from the local banks. These are running nightly, and the guys can see the results every morning when they come back. And then we have 26,000 unit test cases that the developers are doing, and we still haven't managed like the coverage for the legacy code. For the new code, anything we do, it's already like 90+% to 100% like automated, but still the legacy that we had before we started with all of that is ahead of us. And we have using different type of technologies for different type of testing across the development cycle. So we are starting basically with a TypeScript for the safety of the code and the strict rules on this one, as mentioned. So this is purely owned by the developers, the web core team as we call it. And this is part of the basically deployment of the code. Then the next one is to make sure that the code has appropriate structure and that it does not have like inappropriate patterns. So for this one, we are using ESLint. And for example, by the way, I like when you read a book about testing in Google, how much effort they spend on the readability of the code. It's really like crazy. So this is really important, because you write the code once, but it's read like many times. Then the next one is just and either on the level of the unit testing, so or it's a level of the snapshot. So the snapshot is to compare if nothing has broken up on the screens, and basically the unit testing is there for the testing of the business logic. All of this one is being basically checked manually during the development. You can request the check or by the deploy. Then we have Cypress, as I mentioned, that we have tried few test cases before, as I mentioned. So we had Tosca, we had Selenium, so now we ended up on this one. I guess it will evolve further as we will go. So there already are not just the developers, but first time this is as well the squad testers are writing the test automation in this framework. And basically there, as I mentioned, so you have to mock the data because we cannot really completely reliable on the local countries at all the time. Then we have the lighthouse that is really making sure that it is performing. This is the front end, so it has to perform nicely. And then we have a sonar cube for the security vulnerabilities. So it really checks if there is not somebody missing passwords or whatever. Because whenever do, then audit is like really hitting us crazy. So this is why, and the different pen testing teams that we are buying or we are collaborating with. And then we have basically the Cypress end-to-end tests. So this is fully in the responsibility of QA team that is distant from the testers that are placed in each and every squad. This is very much hitting the regression. These are really like end-to-end scenarios that we have to make sure that we have not broke up anything during the development process and that the functionalities is working as intended. But you still are as well having this manual exploratory testing. So this is, as I mentioned, so we have in part of each and every squad is a tester or more testers usually. And they are still like helping out, not just with the test automation, but as well with the manual testing. And then we do quick manual regression. And we still force the people of George to use George and test the stuff on their money. Basically after release, because there is still a bunch of topics you will only realize when you understand the numbers, when you understand it on your numbers best. That's basically it, as I mentioned. So that was the story of George. Thank you very much. Oh, still questions. How have we achieved organizational structure changes? It was learning by doing. Simply you have started to feel that the organization is not good enough and you are not able to, there are 2 points. So from the external point within Erste Group, everybody believes that working at George is the best job you can get, but from the part of the George, when you are working that, it gets most of the time frustrated, because when you are at the given point of time delivered something for somebody, you have not delivered something for 5 other guys in the 5 different countries. You have delivered something for like 1-2 countries at max. So always, mostly people attack you with what you have not done, and not like giving you praise for what you have done. And in this type of very open culture, simply you see problems that you believe that the new structure change will solve. And I believe that our management team that we have there, that it is like people that are trying to foster open culture where everything can be said and everybody is a little bit crazy in his own way. But this is making all these discussions easier. So that's why we always agree that, look, this doesn't work anymore. We have to change it. What might be the best way to change it? You get inspired by many different companies around, and then you try it out, and you still solve something, but after a while you realize that something else is still not good enough. So that's why it's a constant learning. And it is really funny because I have been talking with a bunch of startups in the past, and there is even agile transformation going on, or there was in the Česká spořitelna as one of the banks. And many of the lessons everybody has to learn by themselves. So you cannot teach it, or you cannot get it from a book reading somewhere. You have to experience it and gain the maturity to make a next step. So it was just learning by doing, I would say. How many testers? So that's a good question. So that there are 30 just QA team, and then the basically tester is part of every team. So I would say like 50 people out of the 350 are basically dedicated to testing. Why we name it George? Look, the official version says that the George was the first autopilot, basically that was ever invented. The inventor called it George. So that was the official version. The unofficial is that simply Boris came to a meeting, let's call it George, and say, okay. So then it was George. For me, how do we evaluate it? We survived, because like delivering in parallel for 6 countries from the same source code, where there are still differences, because no matter how we want to make it the same, payment in local national bank in Czech Republic is executed differently than in SEPA in Austria, than in Romania, than in Hungary. So we have different countries, different legislation, different currencies. So we survived, and I'm very happy, because without the test automation we would not. There would be no George. You simply cannot handle that manually. You cannot then deliver. You would be stuck with testing. Yes. So there is nothing to evaluate. So we are deploying, as I mentioned, every second week, but like the banks are preferring to put to production only every second release. So every month the release goes up to the production. Every second week it is ended up to the local bank to see like what are the features, what is new, and whether or not it works, and so on and so on. This is a good question, because I don't know why this was simply like we tried Tosca, and to keep it up to date was crazy difficult, basically. So I don't know whether Cypress is better, but I cannot tell. I'm not that deep. This I let on the team to select, so unfortunately. This is a good question, most probably because we did the test automation in a very evolutionary way, and we always did one piece, and then maybe now it is too late for any complex test automation platform. So the change might require too much effort. So we simply automated the way we grow and started, as I mentioned, from backend, then front end, and then mobile apps. This is the oldest technology will be basically the Elasticsearch that we started on, and the Java on the backend. Then basically on the front end we changed the framework already, so now we are on the React. We started with Backbone, so I guess that the oldest technology will still be the Java backend with the Elasticsearch. This depends very much on the country, basically which technology or which platform they're using. For example, in Romania, it's 95% using mobile app only, so almost nobody is using the web. In Austria, it is 55 mobile versus 45 basically web, so it depends. But already we passed everywhere that the mobile is the leader. But that might not be the most important. While on the web, in average you use it 4 times a month. On the mobile you use it more than 22 times a month. So this is for us more important, that we are with the customer way more frequently. That's why we now are bringing a lot of stuff to make mobile preferred, and by purpose don't give it on the web anymore, because we would like to shift this trend and be with the customer more. That's a good question. I would say that few days before the release. So the end-to-end, if we run all those 450 on the individual country with the environment, few days, because always something is wrong. So with the test data or something like that. So it's still not easy. Look, I mean, we have, as a central team, everything is the same for all the countries. So we are delivering already tested version to the local countries. Yet local countries still do their own testing, because they on one hand have to, from the audit perspective. And on one hand, they are still using some different tools. So I at least know that in Česka we are still using another, some Rocket, whatever tool for test automation in addition, just to have a proof that it's working well. And not sometimes we as well are finding mistakes, that it's not just formality. We do. Good question. On this one, this is from the test guys that sent me. I have no clue. I don't even know what's cucumber, other than the cucumber. Look, we are tracking how many bugs have been found after we released George to the individual countries. So this is the strongest KPI that we have on the QA teams. That basically our goal is that there is no bug found by the local country once we deliver it, and we are still not there. It was this 450, if I'm not mistaken, that each of them has roughly 15 to 20 test cases inside, so you can multiply it. Cool.
I would like to thank you. This was special for me because I was trying to get here on the stage somebody from our stakeholders. This is the guy we usually report the results, and I would like to let him talk about the testing. So I
hope I didn't disappoint you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. Have fun.
And now we have 10. We are still online? Okay. Now we have 10-minute break. So we will start in 5 minutes to 5.
I'm surrounded, can't stop for a second to breathe. My thoughts are flowing like water. One day soon I will find, I know I am close, I know I will shine. One day soon I will fly, I know I am free, I'm feeling alive. Take me back to the jungle. Take me back to the jungle. Hey. Take me back to the jungle. The city keeps me distracted, but I know where I should be. Tell my mama I'm leaving. Just take your mask off and join me. I know you're dying to see all the secrets I'm hiding. One day soon I will find, I know I am close, I know I will shine. One day soon I will fly, I know I am free, I'm feeling alive. Take me back to the jungle. Take me back to the jungle. Hey. Take me back to the jungle. I want to get rid of the stress that builds within me. Oh, I want to take off my clothes and hang from a tree. Oh, one day soon I will find, I know I am close, I know I will shine. One day soon I will fly, I know I am free, I'm feeling alive. Take me back to the jungle. Take me back to the jungle. Take me back to the jungle. together now, you'll see just how this life is supposed to be. Come on.
So welcome back after short break. Hello online attendees. I hope you are enjoying our Tesena Fest, and we are now continuing with last talk, and I would like to invite Gitte on the stage.
And I'll try not to fall.
Okay, so stage is yours.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for staying for my presentation as well. I hope it'll be up there eventually. There it was. My name is Gitte Ottersen, and I'll be talking a bit about the role of a test manager. Is that still a thing, or is it are we kind of the dinosaurs being extinct, or what is happening? But before we dive into that, just one practical thing. You will see that I'm eating candy. I will continue to eat candy because the alternative thing is that I'll be coughing all the time. So sorry for eating candy during my presentation. It is not COVID. If it was, I would have had it for 5 years, so it doesn't. But my name is Gitte. I've been working with testing for 26 years. Originally, I came from the Air Force. I was a corporal in the Royal Danish Air Force and became, as many others from my generation, a tester because I was a business tester. Testing a new command and control system for NATO, and found out that that testing thing was quite fun and chose to go that way. Today, actually in February 2020, I decided to quit my job in Capgemini, where I was a consultant. A month before, my boss had decided to stop. And that sort of made it for me clear that I needed to try something new as well. Funny enough, we decided after that we could do that together. So, and remember, 12th of February 2020, we started our new company, Key to Quality, on April 1st, 2020. And I don't know if you can remember what happened in March 2020. We had a couple of interesting months, just let us put it that way. But I work with testing 24/7, more or less. I'm a test manager, a consultant. I do process improvement, TPI assessments, plus I do a lot of training. I love training. I love the discussions. I love the looking into different people's context and see, so how are you doing it at your place? What are the challenges you have in your context? And how can we best improve the way you work? How can we make most value out of testing in your context? And you will hear during this presentation that that word pops up a lot when I talk, context. Because context matters. Context matters quite a bit. Sometimes when we communicate, we have a tendency to be very black or white. This is true, this is false. But I will argue that for most things in life, there are no such things as black and white. There are many, many, many different nuances. And that also goes for the role of a test manager. Because, I mean, I'm a test manager, but I'm also a quality coach. I know I have colleagues and friends who are QA managers. I mean, QA lead, test lead, QA manager, quality enabler, quality coach, quality orchestrator, test manager. So many different names. We are not just test managers, because sometimes different names sort of direct us in another direction than the classical test manager. But does it mean that it has to die? My claim is that it doesn't. Let's take it from scratch. And now I know, before Indy starts booing, I know there's people who love ISTQB and there are people who hate ISTQB. I use ISTQB just as I use TMAP, just as I use any other thing that can help me learn. So, because it's all about context. Different things matters in different situations. ISTQB says a test manager is tasked with the overall responsibility for the test process and successful leadership of the test activities. That's the formal definition of ISTQB, and I think that's the one, if you have been in testing for some years, that is how you would see the traditional test manager. That would be the one also you would think of in a context of, for example, a waterfall. Then we have the orchestrator. We heard in our the first presentation about quality orchestration. In the new TMAP book, Quality for Devops Teams, they define the new role as end-to-end quality orchestrator, as being the person responsible for organizing end-to-end quality across multiple teams. So often if you have an agile context that is scaled, multiple teams working on the same value stream, on the same platform, on the same solution. You would need someone to orchestrate tests across the teams. I'll get back to that. And then a quality coach, that's another one. Have you noticed that? That role is growing. We hear more and more about quality coaches coming on. Anne-Marie Sharrett received USA's Test Excellence Award this summer. She wrote the book about quality coaching and has an amazing website where you can learn a lot about it. She defines a quality coach as someone who guides, supports, and rallies a team to collectively own and improve quality through facilitation, education, experimentation, and visualization. They are passionate advocates for quality. So that's 3 different roles, 3 different definitions. Let's dive into them and see, are there only one role or what is it? So, the evil document of ISTQB. No, sorry, I'll behave now. I'm a little bit tired of rants about ISTQB. So, test manager. He or she will be the one defining and implementing test policy and test strategy. Planning test activities. So if we talk in waterfall terms, doing the planning of system testing, acceptance testing, whatever test phases, test levels that you have. She will develop the skills and the careers of the testers within the team. Help them grow. Monitor and control as a test phase is executed, but also during the whole preparation to a test phase. She'll monitor the progress and help with impediments. Defect management. Of course, reporting. Reporting in terms of having dashboards, being participant in status meetings, go, no-go meetings, formal summary reports, and whatever reporting you need. Test manager will do that, ensuring that we have sufficient infrastructure to do our testing. I mean, that is, I think, pain point number 1 every place I've been. And I've been in many different companies over the years. This is a repeating challenge for the test managers and for the teams, that our infrastructure is not good enough. Metrics, tooling, but also sharing testing perspectives. Educating stakeholders. Marketing for testing. Being responsible for initiating the analysis and design of that forms the basis for the test. So ensuring that when we have a new feature, someone with a testing perspective will analyze that, will design and implement the test cases that we need to test that. Whether that's automated or manual, whether it's exploratory, that doesn't really matter. It's the activity of ensuring that someone actually starts thinking about how do we test and implements the most efficient way of testing. So that's sort of the ISTQB test manager. If you've been in testing for a while, I think there's not many surprises here, right? You can recognize that role. Then take a look. This is the latest book from Sogeti from TMAP called Quality for DevOps Teams. In here, they define the role of the end-to-end quality orchestrator. So the quality orchestrator creates control on quality when implemented changes. So looking at how can we ensure quality across the platform when we change, when we add features, when we change the platform. How can we create transparency on quality and progress and communicate on that? How can we support continuous improvement? The thing is, we don't just start a project, create a test process, and then that's how we do. I mean, we just saw the latest, the presentation right before me. How many times did they change their way of working because they needed to change, because they grew, because they not found new challenges they would need to improve. So we need to have some focus on a continuous improvement also for test and quality. One of the biggest challenges, I don't know, quick raise of hands. Sorry guys, I'll raise the hands in the room. Any of you working within a scaled agile context? Not necessarily safe. It can be safe or less or Scrum at scale or whatever. Any scaled agile in here? That's amazing. None? Interesting. That was a new feeling for me. Huh. Okay, in scaled agile, one of the biggest challenges we see, or big challenges we see from a testing perspective is we now have an agile release train. It might have 10 different teams. They're working on the same value stream. So they're working on the same solution, maybe across platforms, but it is a common solution, solution they have in common. But very often the individual teams will be focusing on what they are doing in their team. We're focusing on our features. But someone needs to focus also on the quality across. You saw there was a lot of end-to-end test cases in the last presentation. Someone needs to ensure that we actually also test across teams on the integrated solution. And very often we don't have that focus down in the individual teams. Often that's something that will fall between two chairs. There's stakeholder analysis. The test manager does that as well. We will still have to do some kind of estimation. Even though we're agile, when you're talking about these big scaled solutions, there are still estimates. There are still estimates in every individual agile team. Just another way. Tooling. Maintaining a backlog for the end-to-end testing. Because it might be that the end-to-end testing is done by the people sitting in the individual's team, so that he sort of have a virtual team across the train. But it might also be a separate team, as we saw again in the last presentation, that they had a separate QA team. But we have to have a focus on having a backlog for what's happening on end-to-end level. What do we need of automation? What do we need of improvement of test data? What do we need in terms of infrastructure? And so forth. All the different tasks, they have to be maintained, they have to be prioritized in a backlog as well. And therefore we also need refinement. We are a team like any other team. We might be virtual because we sit every day in a normal agile train within the agile release. We sit in a normal team within the agile release train. But we are also part of an end-to-end team. So we need to do planning for that as well. So these are all things that a quality orchestrator could do. And then comes this one. If you want to take notes for one website on this presentation, take notes of the one in the lower right corner right now. Because that is where you will find Anne-Marie Sherritt's book about quality coaching. And there's a lot of good stuff out there. There's a lot of inspiration for you if you in any way coach or facilitate or mentor, no matter whether you are a tester or not. There's good stuff to get over there. She has defined the skills and the traits of the quality coach. And I know this is hard to read, so I've tried to organize it the same way as I did for the two other roles. But she went in and defined this, also inspired by some of the other people who has been working on defining the role as quality coach. So the quality coach is a change agent. Someone who would help the work with continuous process improvement, continue to improve the way we work. He or she will facilitate and support that. There's a coaching in testing practices. So that, I mean, I think we in one of our former discussions earlier today, I also used the word of Swiss Army knife. The quality coach is a bit of a Swiss Army knife, because I mean, there's facilitating change, there's coaching. You need to be a good coach, but one thing is to understand how you coach. But you also need to mentor, you also need to help. In order to coach and mentor in testing, you need to know about testing. You need to know what good testing practices are. If you are not a good tester and understand what is good exploratory testing, what is a test design technique, how do we plan end-to-end testing, whatever you need to talk with your team about. If you don't understand it yourself, it's really difficult to mentor or help others in improving. So you are a Swiss Army knife here. So you'll be coaching, you'll be mentoring, but you'll also be facilitating the team. That could be facilitating a retrospective. Could be facilitating a retrospective focusing on testing, but not necessarily. But there is a lot of facilitation in here. There's an aspect of research. In tools, in technologies, in ways of working. Because the best way, if you need to be able to distribute information and advice up under mentoring, you need to know stuff. You also need to look ahead and look what's coming. How can we improve our ways of working in terms of approaches? If we are in the process of changing, going from waterfall to agile, for example, there's a lot of stuff that's the same in testing, but there's also a lot of stuff that changes. And you need to advise on that, and if you need to coach on that, you need to be there understanding all that upfront. Consulting. So if we need to discuss, if the team wants to discuss metrics, if they want to find out a better way of estimating, what do we do about test automation? If you want to help your team giving advice in these things, again, Swiss Army knife, you need to know. There's a part of advocacy. I would argue that even though it's not in the two other roles, that should always be the role of someone who is orchestrating or managing test. Someone who is a test lead in some kind, in some way or another. There should be an aspect of advocating. Because I don't know about your companies, but I still see that we need to argue for explaining and advocating for the need of testing. I still think we need to explain why there is a difference in grabbing someone randomly from business and asking them to test for a couple of weeks, or to combine that with having a skilled team of agile testers or a skilled group of agile testers together with the business. It's extremely valuable to have business to test, but it cannot stand on its own. They know the business, they know the domain, but they don't know about testing. So there's a need for advocacy. And then there's a marketing. Communicating and marketing about what we are doing in terms of quality. So that's a quality coach. Sorry. So the thing is, a test manager develops testing strategies, right? Develops and implements. She's responsible for software testing activities. The coach facilitates, enables, helps. You see the difference? This one is accountable and responsible for the test process in the team. and for the implementation of it. This one helps, facilitates, coach, assists the team, but the responsibility of it is within the team. So don't start reading it, it's impossible. You can get the slides afterwards. I was just trying to show you, there's actually a lot of different skills. We talked about skills earlier. Now this is skill sets for test manager, end-to-end quality orchestrator, and quality coach. So that's a sum up of what I've shown you on the previous slides. There's a lot of competences, there's some overlap. You will see metrics everywhere, you will see estimation, you will see strategy. But there's also differences. So the thing is, there's a whole lot of things to learn. Do you really have, do I have to choose? Oh, sorry, I really, really like that him. He's in all my presentations. Even all my training material, I like my owl. But the thing is, do you have to pick? Do you have to say, I'm a test manager, I'm a quality coach, or I'm an orchestrator? My answer to that is no, you don't. Because look at it in a whole other way. Look at this. It's a menu. It's a menu in a buffet restaurant with a lot of different dishes you can choose between. Lot of different things you can pick depending on your context. So you don't need to stay in one column and say, okay, so I am a test manager as according to ISTQB, and I will do nothing else than that. You need to look at your context, and then you need to figure out what competencies do you need there. And that's a whole nother thing. So the thing is, you need the right tools and the right competences for your job. I think he has a little bit of learning to do there. Or a long working day before he's done. But it always start with context. So you could say, look at your own. Are you in a waterfall? We could make it a little bit modern, call it a V model. Or are you maybe in a Scrum kind of environment? Normal, agile? Are you in a hybrid? I've been in quite a few hybrids where we have a waterfall requirement process in the beginning because that is how the contracts, amongst others in Denmark, in the public sector, we will get a requirement specification that covers the solution as a whole. So that's kind of a waterfallish contract thing. But many companies within the company, as they develop, as they do the internal testing, they're actually trying to be agile. But they're agile-ish because they sort of put things on a shelf as they get done. And then eventually they have a package that is big enough according to the contract, and you will have a formal waterfall acceptance test. That's a hybrid. Could also be, you have this one. This is the simple overview of SAFE. I like the word simple in that context. Or it can be, you have this. I took the diplomatic solution of putting in a quilt. Originally, I had 2 cowboys on horses riding out in the wild, wild west, because that is also sometimes how it feels in some projects. Like it's a bunch of cowboys herding cats. In other words, it's a quilt of bits and pieces we're taking from here and there and trying to make work. So what type of development model, framework, whatever, do we have? But that's only one aspect. There's much more to it. Because, I mean, what about the contract? As I said, if you have a in Denmark, we have a type of contract called K02. K02 is a formal contract for bigger IT projects in the public sector. K02 is 100% waterfall or hybrid. So that defines a lot of my job as a test manager, depending on whether I'm on the vendor side or on the customer side. On the other hand, if I'm in an agile team in-house, we are developing software for ourselves, that's a whole nother thing. There's no formal contract. Culture. Culture can be many things. It can be culture within the team, the interest and willingness in testing, in doing testing. If you are not a professional tester, that will change the way you have to work as a test leader. It could be culture in terms of geography. Are we outsourcing, or are we just distributed? Some are in Denmark, some are in Ukraine, some are in Czech Republic, some are in India, wherever. So it can be geography, but it can also be just culture in terms of how we work together as individuals, how we treat each other, how we communicate together. That'll affect the way that I have to work as a test manager. And again, the organization. Do we have a line organization where we have a bunch of silos, or development, test, architecture, whatever silos? That's one kind of organization. Or have we actually decided to go all in on SAFe, gotten rid of the whole structure and created agile release trains? Another kind of organization. What is your domain? We just heard bank. Currently, I'm in pharma for the first time in my life science. And I've been in healthcare before. I've been in defense and other things. But life science and pharma has a whole other set of rules that I have to follow that makes some of my work going back towards the traditional test manager, other than what I would normally do in an agile context. So domain matters as well. What are the competencies of your team? So if you think about your own team, the team or the project you're in, show of hands, do you have testers in your team? Yes. I see also hands not raised. The thing is, even though we talk about agile and talking about the agile tester and having a tester in all agile teams, very many of us don't. It's been a while since I was on a project where I had dedicated professional testers. So the test competences in the team are smaller or different. Not necessarily smaller, but different. But that makes my work different as well. Regulations. I said pharma. There's a lot of regulations, there's a lot of standards. That changes the way we need to work. That changes the demands for traceability, for reporting, for governance. Tools. Do we have any? Or are we still doing all test management and all test documentation in Excel? We still see that, even in 2022. Or are we doing it in Jira or Zephyr or Azure or PactiTest, or wherever are we doing our testing? The tooling also changes the way we need to work. And of course, locations in terms of are we sitting together or not. All these things and the development model will affect the way you work and the competences you need as a quality manager / QA lead / quality coach, whatever you call yourself. And what you need to do is you need to fill up your plate at the buffet with exactly what you need. So you need to start looking at that menu. First of all, identify your context. Are there any specific needs? Are there any regulations, standards, whatever? What do I need to do? What competences do I then need? What skills do I need to be able to fulfill my work, to fulfill my duties, and to add value? That's what we're here for, adding value to our team, to our project, to our train, to whatever constellation you have. What is the package that I need so that I can add most possible value? And I think that's something that is worth sitting down and thinking about. Sit down tonight, maybe not tonight, later this week. Saturday evening, no one else does anything else Saturday evening. Grab the menu. look at those couple of slides saying, identifying what is my context. What are the needs of my company? How can I best possibly add value to my team or my project? And find out what is it then that I need to improve to help my team the best possible way. So how can I do that? How can I learn? There's many different ways. You can read a book. Surprise, there's books out there. There's a lot of testing books. Peers in your organization. We had also during the sessions we had in the beginning, the lean coffee, discussions about having communities within the companies. Real good thing if you can create peer network in your company where you can share, where you can learn from each other. Listen to a podcast. There are many podcasts out there about agile, about testing, about quality. Conferences. You're here right now. You're there right now. And the thing is, it's not only while you're listening to us standing up here talking that you learn. You learn every minute you talk to someone else and share your challenges and your experiences. The more we do that, the better we get. YouTube has a lot of good videos. It also has a lot of bad videos. There's only one way to find out. Try it. You can always push next. Blogs, webinars, articles, communities, and training. Whether you are a fan of ISTQB, Team Map, rapid software testing, or whatever you choose, there's learning in all of it. It is not the syllabi that defines good learning. It's the people teaching that defines good learning. I can find training courses of any kind that are good, and I can learn from all. So don't exclude yourself from learning because it has the wrong abbreviation on the front page. And it doesn't matter whether that is in ISTQB, TMAP, or RST. Or BBST. Oh, that was an abbreviation more. The thing is, you can learn from all of them. Cherry pick what you need. Find out what your needs are and follow your path for learning. I've shared here a couple of places where I go to learn, books that I read. That's not all of them. I just took my top 4 books. I actually have a lot of books, some for reference, some for reading. But that was what I had for you. I hope some of you have some questions as well. Thank you very much. I saw the first question. What's your opinion on SAFe framework? The most important thing in that sentence is the last word. Framework. There's good stuff and bad stuff in SAFe. I'm not religious about that part. But what really frustrates me is to see a lot of company picking SAFe, or any other framework for that sake, reading it as it was the Bible, and implementing it as such, completely without being critical. There's a lot of good stuff in SAFe, and I've been in SAFe Agile release trains and been a part of implementing SAFe. I think it's becoming a bit too big. But maybe there's a need for that. But the thing is, you need to look at it, and then you need to take what can add value in your context and remove what can't. The first thing you will see when you see the drawing of the SAFe framework is there's no test manager in there. There's not an end-to-end quality orchestrator or quality coach either. I asked when I took my SAFe SPC training, where's the test manager gone? Say, oh yeah, okay, we don't have the role as such. But if you look at the system architect in the Agile release train, that's not necessarily only one person. It can be several persons. One of those could be a test architect. So if you need, I have seen examples of companies implementing SAFe, and the first thing they did was firing all test managers because the framework said there should be no test managers. And that's really, really dumb. Pardon my French. Sorry, companies. But it is, because you have to start looking at your own context. If you have a huge train, with a lot of complexity, with a lot of integrations. And yes, you will need someone to orchestrate. So don't read the frameworks as they were, sorry, and if I offend anyone, Holy Script. It's not. It's a framework. So it's not. I like parts of Safe, but I don't love it. How do you see testers in DevOps? I don't see any difference whether they are in DevOps or in Agile. And I am pretty sure I will get in trouble for this, but I think of DevOps as an extension to Agile. I think testers are just as important there as they are in Agile. There's a need when you go for DevOps, and if you want to go the whole continuous journey and actually do continuous delivery, continuous deployment, there's a whole need of automation that runs for some more technical aspects. But I mean, you still need to think, no matter what, no matter how much automation you need to do, you still need to figure out what to automate. If you don't have a good mindset about what testing is, then it doesn't really matter what kind of electricity you put in it when you automated it. Bad stuff in, bad stuff out. So testers or testing mindset, testing is necessary in DevOps. Good testing. And therefore I prefer to have testers because they actually like testing. Not all professions like testing. Thank you. What alternative to Safe do you like? To be honest, Safe is the only one I've tried of all those scaled thingies. There's Less and Safe and Scrum at Scale, and then the one that someone called the Spotify model, which is not a model because Spotify says it's not a model. I don't have a favorite because the only one I have practical experience with is Safe. So sorry. What do you think about DevOps engineers? I like them. They're nice people. Sorry, it's late. I'm not really sure what is meant with the question. I think, what is a DevOps engineer? I'm not sure, to be honest. Is that someone who's responsible for the whole structure, makes the infrastructure work for continuous this and that? Or what is a DevOps engineer?
Probably the tooling around that.
Yeah, the one responsible for the tooling to ensure that the tooling and the infrastructure and stuff works. I think that's a really good idea because we are all struggling, or not all, but many are struggling with infrastructure, environments, data. So if you have someone who's actually specialized in that and who actually loves doing it, I think that would be of value to any team. No problem, I was done. Thank you very much.
We have a couple of last slides before we will finish that structured and organized part, and then there will be disorganized part. Okay, hello and welcome back after 10-second break. We are done. Tesena Fest Online is over. Tesena Fest Online 2022 is history. I hope you enjoy the talks. I would like to thank you, our speakers, and I would like to ask you, dear speakers, come here, so we will give you last applause and some presents. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So some more information or some more slides I prepared because I want to be also star of this conference. So I would like to thank you to all speakers and workshop leaders who help us to make this great event. I don't want to go through all the faces and read their names or tell their names, but these are the guys who contribute. I would really like thank you to all you guys. I would like to also thank you for the companies who were supporting us by sending speakers or promoting the event or in different ways. So these are the companies supported us. And that's done for online stream. We can now turn it off. Hello. And we will start with off.